The sound was not a roar, nor was it an explosion. It was the terrifying, high-pitched whine of reality itself, snapping under a weight it was never designed to bear. The hyperbolic time chamber, a dimension of infinite white, constructed by the highest magics of the celestial realm to withstand the training of gods, began to bleed. It did not bleed blood, but color. Great fissures of impossible violet and blinding white tore through the void, leaking into the physical plane of the world of void outside. Standing before the dimensional gate, the Grand Priest, Daishinkan, felt a sensation he had not experienced since the dawn of the First Era, a cold, trembling vibration in his fingertips. Fear. He watched as the heavy, golden doors of the ultimate chamber, sealed by the combined will of the angels and Zeno himself, began to rust. They aged 1 billion years in a single second, corroding, flaking, and dissolving into dust. From the swirling darkness beyond the threshold, there was no key blast. There was no shouting of a technique name. There was only a footstep. One heavy step that landed with the weight of a dying star. A figure emerged, draped in ragged vestiges of an orange ghee that had long since lost its color, now stained the gray of ash and the black of the abyss. His hair was not golden, nor blue, nor silver. It flowed like liquid ink, rimmed with a halo of blinding starlight. Son Goku had not merely survived the million-year sentence, he had metabolized the eternity. He looked up, his eyes containing no pupils, only 2 swirling galaxies of light and dark, and when he spoke, the multiverse shuddered. "The play?" Goku whispered, his voice sounding like 2 stones grinding together at the bottom of the ocean, "is finally over. Before the heavens collapse and the timelines dissolve into memory, anchor yourself to this legend. Subscribe now to witness the birth of the final deity, and let us walk this path to the end of time together." The door did not slam. It sealed with a hiss of finality that sounded like a lung expelling its last breath. When the heavy golden gates of the ultimate time chamber locked into place, the sound vibrated through the floor and up through the soles of Goku's boots, settling deep in the marrow of his bones. He stood there for a long time, staring at the seam where the 2 doors met, waiting for the familiar click of a lock turning or the muffled voice of the Grand Priest offering a final condition. There was nothing. Silence in the time chamber was not merely the absence of noise, it was a physical weight, a heavy, suffocating blanket that pressed against the eardrums. In the standard hyperbolic time chamber on Earth, there was the subtle hum of the hourglass, the distant shifting of the temperature, the feeling of planetary rotation. But here, in this prison constructed outside the boundaries of the multiverse, there was only the white. It was a white so absolute, so blindingly pure, that it felt aggressive. It erased depth perception. It erased shadow. It threatened to erase him. 1 million years, Goku said aloud. His voice didn't echo. The void swallowed the sound instantly, devouring the vibrations before they could travel more than a few inches. He clenched his fists, the leather of his gloves creaking. A comforting, familiar sound. He smiled, though the expression didn't quite reach his eyes. He forced the smile, pulling it onto his face like a mask he was already afraid of losing. "All right," he whispered, turning his back on the door. "Just a long training session. The longest one yet. When I get out, it'll be strong enough to protect everyone forever." He began with the basics. For the first decade, Son Goku remained Son Goku. He moved through the katas of the turtle school, his body snapping into positions drilled into him since boyhood. He threw punches that generated shockwaves, tearing through the infinite atmosphere. He transformed, cycling through golden, red, and blue, lighting up the void with brilliant explosions of ki that acted as artificial suns. He created imaginary opponents, copies of Vegeta, echoes of Jiren, phantoms of Frieza, and he fought them with the joy of a warrior who believes there is a finish line. But time is a cruel solvent. It dissolves intent. By the 50th year, the Phantom Vegeta stopped fighting back. The memory of the prince's scowl, the specific cadence of his arrogance, began to blur. Goku would throw a punch, expecting a counter, but his mind could no longer perfectly simulate the impact. The imaginary rival stood still, face blank, dissolving into mist. Goku shook his head, slapping his cheeks to wake himself up, blaming the fatigue. But he didn't sleep. In this dimension, the body did not age, and the need for sleep was suspended. He was trapped in a perpetual moment of wakefulness, an eternal noon without a sunset. By the 200th year, the training stopped. Goku sat in the center of the infinite nothingness, his legs crossed, his breathing shallow. The orange of his gi was the only color in the universe. He looked down at his hands. They were trembling, not from exertion, but from a terrifying realization that had begun to creep up his spine like a cold insect. He could not remember Chi-Chi's voice. He closed his eyes, straining, digging his fingernails into his palms, until blood welled up. He tried to summon the sound of her shouting his name, the warmth of her cooking, the smell of the mountain air near his home. He found only static. He found the white void bleeding into his mind, bleaching his memories. The panic set in, then a primal, animalistic terror. He leaped to his feet, screaming into the silence. "I am Son Goku," he roared, transforming into Super Saiyan Blue, the aura exploding outward in a jagged sphere of turquoise flame. "I am a Saiyan raised on Earth! I have a wife! I have sons!" He fired a Kamehameha into the distance, a massive beam of blue light that stretched for miles, screaming as he poured every ounce of his fear into the blast. He wanted to break the wall. He wanted to crack the sky. He wanted the universe to acknowledge that he existed. But the beam simply traveled until it faded, dissipated by the physics of a realm designed to contain monsters. The light died. The silence returned, heavier than before. Goku fell to his knees, his breathing ragged, the blue aura flickering and dying out, leaving him in the base form that suddenly felt so small, so fragile. The hero was beginning to starve, not for food, but for connection. A Saiyan's power is drawn from emotion, from the friction of battle, from the desire to protect. In a vacuum, with nothing to protect and no one to fight, the fire had no fuel. The silence wrapped its cold fingers around his heart and squeezed. The white world stared back at him, indifferent, waiting for the flicker of his soul to go out. The turning point came in the 5,000th year, or perhaps the 10,000th. Goku had lost the ability to measure time. Without a sun to rise or set, time was no longer a river. It was a swamp, stagnant and suffocating. He lay on his back, staring up into the featureless expanse. He had stopped moving years ago. His muscles, though magically preserved by the chamber's stasis, felt atrophied by despair. His mind, however, was running a marathon of madness. The isolation had peeled away the layers of his socialization. The son Goku, who was polite, who showed mercy, who laughed with a mouthful of rice, that creature was dying. In its place, something ancient was waking up, the Saiyan instinct. Deep in his genetic code, buried under decades of human nurturing, lay the primal directive of his race. Conquer, survive, evolve. It started as a whisper in the back of his skull, a voice that sounded like his own, but devoid of warmth. "Why do you weep for them?" it asked. "They are dust. They have been dead for eons. While you lay here rotting, their bones have turned to oil, and their civilizations to ash. You are the only thing that is real." "No," Goku croaked, his voice unused and brittle. "They are waiting. They are gone," the voice hissed, growing louder, sharper. "Vegeta, Gohan, even the gods. They have forgotten you. You are a ghost haunting a graveyard. Get up." Goku squeezed his eyes shut, tears leaking from the corners. But the tears were different now. They were hot, burning his skin. Anger, a pure, white-hot spark of rage ignited in his gut. Not rage at a villain, but rage at his own weakness. Rage at the Grand Priest. Rage at the universe that had discarded him like a broken toy. He stood up. The movement was jerky, unnatural, like a puppet being yanked by strings. His eyes opened, and for the first time in millennia, the warmth was gone. The soft, rounded pupils of the earth-raised Saiyan had sharpened. The iris was a hard, flinty black. He didn't scream this time. He didn't power up with a flashy display. He simply let the rage flow. He stopped fighting the darkness in his mind and instead opened the door to it. He invited the monster in. "Adapt," his blood screamed. "If the environment is emptiness, then you must become the emptiness." He assumed a stance that belonged to no school. It was low, feral, his fingers curled into claws. He wasn't fighting a shadow anymore. He was fighting his own limitations. He began to move, not with the fluid grace of martial arts, but with the brutal efficiency of a predator tearing through meat. He attacked the air, ripping at the fabric of the dimension. He wasn't trying to improve his technique. He was trying to mutilate reality. Ki began to leak from him, but it wasn't the golden light of the Super Saiyan. It was dark, heavy, and viscous. It dripped from his shoulders like tar. The darkness he had suppressed for his entire life, the Oozaru, the savage conqueror, the destroyer, was finally being allowed to breathe. For the next 100,000 years, Goku dissected himself. He mentally replayed every battle he had ever fought, but this time, he changed the ending. In his mind, he didn't spare Frieza and Namek. He vaporized him instantly. He didn't give Cell a Senzu Bean. He crushed his core without hesitation. He didn't offer mercy to Moro. He annihilated him. He rewrote his own history, stripping away the mercy, the hesitation, the humanity. He forged his mind into a blade. The pain of losing his family dulled, then calloused over, until the memories of Gohan and Goten were no longer sources of sorrow, but merely data points of a past life that belonged to a stranger. Son Goku died in the silence. And in the center of the white void, a king sat down to meditate. He was no longer starving. He was feeding. He fed on the isolation, converting the loneliness into focus. He fed on the despair, compressing it into power. He realized that the Grand Priest had made a fatal calculation. He had trapped a Saiyan, a being of infinite potential, in a box of infinite time. He had not created a prison. He had created an incubator. The silence was no longer a weight. It was a canvas. 500,000 years. Halfway to eternity. The being who sat in the center of the void was a study in stillness. The tattered remains of his gi had long ago turned to dust, reformed only by the projection of his own ki, a ghostly garment of woven energy that shimmered like gray smoke. His hair had grown long, cascading down his back in a wild, unkempt mane that defied gravity, floating as if underwater. But it was the energy radiating from him that defied the laws of the cosmos. He sat in the lotus position, floating a few inches above the white floor. On his left side, the air was cold, crystallized into intricate fractals of silver light. This was the domain of the angels. Ultra instinct. He had mastered it not through training, but through the absolute cessation of desire. He had forgotten hunger, forgotten love, forgotten the need to be anything other than a point of observation in the universe. His heart beat once every hour. His mind was a polished mirror, reflecting everything, holding on to nothing. But on his right side, the air boiled. Space warped and twisted, turning a bruised purple and blood red. Heat shimmered in violent waves. This was the Saiyan soul, the ego, the hunger, the darkness he had awakened in the first era of his imprisonment. It was a screaming mouth that wanted to devour the gods. It was the primal roar of the Uzuru condensed into a singularity of destruction. For eons, these two forces had warred within him. They were oil and water, matter and antimatter. Ultra instinct demanded peace, Saiyan instinct demanded conquest. Every time he tried to use them together, his body tore itself apart. He had spent centuries regenerating from self-inflicted wounds, his bones shattering under the pressure of trying to house two opposing infinities. But he had time. He had nothing but time. Integration, he whispered. The word sounded strange, like a stone dropping into a deep well. He closed his eyes. In his mind's eye, he visualized the two oceans of power, the silver ocean of calm, the red ocean of rage. He stopped trying to build a dam between them. He stopped trying to switch from one to the other. Let them collide. He inhaled, and the void around him screamed. The white floor cracked, spiderwebs of fissures racing out for miles. He pulled the silver light into his heart. He pulled the red darkness into his spine. Pain. It was a pain that transcended the physical. It was the pain of a star collapsing. His soul felt like it was being ripped in half and sewn back together with burning wire. His skin cracked, glowing with blinding light from the fissures. He screamed, a sound that harmonized with the tearing of the dimension. He forced the tranquility of the angel to wrap around the rage of the beast. He used the calm to focus the anger, to refine it, to sharpen it from a blunt club into a monomolecular edge. He used the rage to fuel the calm, giving the passive state of ultra instinct a terrifying, driving purpose. He was not suppressing his emotions to achieve power. He was weaponizing them. The explosion was silent. A sphere of energy expanded from his body, consuming the white void. It wasn't gold, or blue, or silver. It was twilight, a swirling, nebulous gray, flecked with stars of pure white and veins of deep, abyssal violet. It was the color of the sky, just after the sun has died, before the true night begins. It was the color of an ending. Goku opened his eyes. The galaxies within them spun slowly. The pupils were gone, replaced by the event horizon of his new power. He looked at his hands. They were wreathed in this new flame, Twilight Ki. It was heavy, dense, feeling more like liquid mercury than gas. He stood up, and the dimension groaned. The infinite space of the time chamber suddenly felt cramped. The air felt thin. He took a step, and the ground rippled like water. He realized then that he was no longer just a fighter. He had become a hazard to the structural integrity of reality. He wasn't just storing ki, he was generating a gravitational field of existence that rivaled a universe. "I see it now," he murmured, his voice layering over itself, the calm, divine tenor of his angelic side overlaying the guttural growl of his Saiyan side. The angels detach themselves to rule. The destroyers indulge themselves to rule. Both are incomplete. Both are blind. He raised a hand, pointing a finger at the distant, unseen horizon of the chamber. Hakai. It wasn't a shout. It was a statement of fact. A beam of twilight energy shot from his fingertip. It didn't travel. It simply erased the space between him and the horizon. A hole appeared in the white fabric of the dimension, a jagged tear revealing a swirling chaos of raw colors underneath. He had punched a hole in the canvas of the spell. He lowered his hand. He wasn't ready to leave yet. The door was still sealed, and he wouldn't break it. Not yet. Breaking the door was the act of a brute. He needed to understand what lay beyond it. He sat back down, the twilight aura pulsing gently around him like a heartbeat. He turned his gaze inward again, But this time, he looked outward, past the walls of the chamber. He sent his senses probing through the cracks in the dimension, filtering through the quantum foam of the multiverse. He listened. For the next 400,000 years, he became the silent observer of the cosmos. He heard the prayers of dying civilizations. He felt the casual flick of Beerus' finger as he destroyed a planet because the food was too greasy. He sensed the cold indifference of the angels as galaxies burned. He watched the Grand Priest shifting timelines like pieces on a board game, erasing tragedies and creating new ones to maintain balance. He watched the hypocrisy of the divine order. He saw the mortals creatures like the man he used to be struggling, bleeding, and dying, always at the mercy of beings who viewed them as ants. He felt the pain of Trunks' timeline, the despair of universes erased in the tournament of power, and the judgment began to form in his heart. It was cold, hard, and absolute. The gods were not guardians. They were gardeners, pruning the weak for their own aesthetic pleasure. They were children with magnifying glasses, burning ants in the sun. They do not deserve the chair, Goku said to the darkness. The twilight key flared, darker now, tinged with the violet of judgment. They have reigned for eons in their ivory towers, he continued, his voice vibrating with the power of 1,000,000 years of solitude. They speak of balance, but they only know control. They speak of justice, but they only know order. He stood up, shedding the last vestiges of his patience. The 1,000,000th year was approaching. The rust on the door outside was finishing its work. I am not the light that saves, he declared, his eyes burning with the binary power. And I am not the darkness that consumes. I am the dusk that falls upon the day. I am the end of the game. He walked toward the spot where the door should be. The air parted around him in reverence. He didn't need to knock. He didn't need to shout. He was the storm that had been waiting in the bottle. And the cork was about to pop. The Grand Priest, Dai Shinkan, stood alone on the floating platform in the world of void. He was a being who existed beyond the concept of anxiety, a creature woven from the fundamental laws of the multiverse. His heart was a metronome of perfect order. Yet, as he watched the great golden doors of the ultimate time chamber, he felt a sensation that made his divine halo tremble. The doors were screaming. It was a sound beyond the auditory spectrum, a psychic shriek of metal and magic being tortured at a molecular level. The divine enchantments he had placed upon the lock seals, designed to hold back the erasure of a timeline, were not breaking. They were rotting. The gold turned to copper, then to iron, then to rusted flake. The bright, celestial shine dulled into a necrotic gray. The air around the gate grew heavy, smelling of ozone and ancient dust. The gravity in the world of void, usually non-existent, suddenly spiked, pulling debris toward the door as if a black hole had opened behind it. It is time, Daishinkan whispered, his voice betraying a flicker of hesitation. 1,000,000 years. Surely the isolation has reduced him to dust. No mortal mind can withstand the eternity. He was trying to convince himself. He was the father of angels, the second highest authority in existence, yet he found himself praying to the silence that the Saiyan was dead. The doors did not swing open. They simply ceased to be. One moment, there was a barrier of divine metal. The next, there was a cloud of fine, metallic sand, drifting into the nothingness. The seal dissolved, revealing the abyss of the chamber within. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. There was no explosion of ki, no triumphant roar, no shockwave. The world of void held its breath. Then, the darkness poured out. It spilled over the threshold like thick, viscous smoke, clinging to the floor, rolling over Daishinkan's boots. It was cold, so cold it burned. And from the depths of that spilled shadow, a footstep echoed. Thud. The sound was heavy, wet, and solid. A figure emerged from the gloom. Daishinkan's eyes widened. He had expected a corpse, or perhaps a raving, broken madman. He had expected a beast, reduced to primal instinct. He did not expect a king. The entity that stepped onto the platform was unrecognizable as the mortal, known as Son Goku. He was taller, his spine elongated by eons of adapting to the crushing gravity of his own power. His gi was gone, replaced by a swirling cloak of gray energy that moved as if it were alive, draping over his shoulders like a shroud of storm clouds. His hair, once a spiky crown of defiance, now flowed down his back like a river of black ink, defying gravity, floating in the halo of power that surrounded him. But it was the face that froze the Grand Priest's blood. The skin was pale, almost translucent, etched with lines not of age, but of sorrow. The eyes were terrible. The whites were gone, replaced by the deep, bruised violet of the twilight key. In the center, where pupils should be, spun two tiny, white singularities. They were eyes that had seen the death of time. Goku stopped 10 paces from the Grand Priest. He didn't take a fighting stance. He merely stood there, his hands hanging loosely at his sides. The air around him distorted, light bending away as if afraid to touch him. Daishinkan, Goku said. The voice was soft, melodic, yet it carried the grinding weight of tectonic plates shifting deep underground. It was a voice composed of two tones, the serene, echoing chime of an angel, and the guttural, subsonic growl of a great ape. Goku. The Grand Priest stepped back, his instincts screaming at him to flee. He suppressed the urge with an iron will. You survive. Survive. Goku tilted his head, a movement so fluid it looked like liquid pouring from a jar. I did not survive, priest. Survival implies a struggle against death. I simply waited. He looked around the world of void, observing the endless expanse of purple nebulas and floating rocks. He took a deep breath, tasting the air of the outside world for the first time in a million years. It smells the same, Goku noted, a tone of profound disappointment coloring his words. Stagnant. You haven't changed anything. You've just kept the wheel turning, grinding the bones of mortals to grease the axle. We maintain the balance. Daishinkan snapped, his composure cracking. Order is necessary. Without us, there is only chaos. Goku looked at him, and the Grand Priest felt his soul wither under the weight of that gaze. Chaos, Goku murmured, raising a hand. A small sphere of twilight energy formed above his palm, gray, violet, and white, swirling in a chaotic yet perfect harmony. Chaos is just a pattern you are too small to understand. And order is just a cage you built because you are afraid of the dark. Suddenly, the sky above them tore open. 3 beams of light crashed down onto the platform, one violet, one blue, one pure white. The shockwave rattled the floating stones, blowing back the dark mist Goku had exuded. Beerus the Destroyer, Whis the Angel, and Vados of Universe 6 stood between the Grand Priest and the prisoner. Beerus looked ragged. He was panting, sweat beading on his forehead. He had sensed the energy shift from his own planet, a chill that had woken him from a nap with a scream caught in his throat. What is this? Beerus snarled, his eyes darting frantically. Grand Priest! What have you released, Goku-san? Whis stepped forward, his staff held ready, though his knuckles were white. The angel's usually playful demeanor was gone, replaced by a sharp, clinical focus. He scanned the figure before him, his eyes widening as he tried to analyze the key signature. I cannot read him. It's not God key. It's not mortal key. It is the end, Vados whispered, stepping back, her staff trembling. Goku looked at his old masters. He looked at Beerus, the cat who had once seemed like an insurmountable mountain. Now, Beerus looked like a frightened pet. He looked at Whis, the teacher who had taught him to move without thinking. Now, he could see the strings attached to Whis, the divine laws that bound him, the limitations of his angelic code. They looked so small. Beerus, Goku said, nodding slightly. Whis, you look tired. Don't mock me, Saiyan. Beerus roared, purple Hakai energy flaring around his body. I don't know what kind of trick this is, or how you survived, but you are immortal. You bow to the gods of destruction. Mortal. Goku tasted the word, finding it nostalgic. I remember being mortal. I remember the fear of death. It was motivating. He took a step forward. Stay back, Beerus shouted, launching a sphere of destruction energy. The Hakai ball, capable of erasing a galaxy, screamed through the air, aimed directly at Goku's chest. Goku didn't dodge. He didn't block. He didn't even blink. The ball of purple destruction hit his chest and vanished. It didn't explode. It didn't deflect. It was simply absorbed into the gray cloak of twilight energy, eaten by the void that now constituted Goku's existence. A ripple of violet light washed over Goku's skin, and he sighed, as if savoring a faint flavor. Spicy, Goku whispered, but empty. There is no intent behind your destruction, Beerus. Only duty. That is why you are weak. Beerus froze, his jaw dropping. Impossible. You taught me that power comes from instinct, Goku said, walking past the frozen destroyer. He stopped in front of Whis. The angel was taller than him, but Goku seemed to loom over him, casting a shadow that stretched for miles. And you, Whis, Goku said softly, you taught me that the body must think for itself, but you forgot to teach me what the soul should do while the body moves. He reached out and gently tapped the gem on Whis' staff. Crack. A hairline fracture appeared on the indestructible divine object. You trapped me in a box for 1,000,000 years, Goku said, addressing them all, his voice rising, resonating with the hum of the collapsing multiverse. You thought time would break me. You thought if you left me in the dark long enough, I would forget who I was. He turned to face the Grand Priest again. The twilight aura flared, shooting pillars of gray fire into the sky, piercing the atmosphere of the world of void, and shaking the throne of Zeno, light years away. You were right, Goku said, his eyes burning like supernovas. I have forgotten who I was. I have forgotten mercy. I have forgotten forgiveness. I have forgotten Goku. He clenched his fist, and the entire floating platform shattered into dust, leaving them all suspended in the void by the sheer force of his will. Now, the entity said, a cruel, thin smile breaking his stoic mask. Let me show you what I have become. The void did not stay empty for long. With the destruction of the viewing platform, the Grand Priest hovered in the vacuum, his expression shifting from shock to a glacial, terrifying resolve. He raised his left hand, the fingers arranging themselves into a complex mudra of divine command. The halo behind his head began to spin, emitting a frequency that resonated across all 12 universes. The experiment, Daishinkan announced, his voice amplified to reach every corner of the dimension, is deemed a failure. The subject has deviated from the parameters of existence. Protocol 0 is in effect. Space tore open in 12 distinct locations around them. From these rifts emerged the angelic host, Mojito, Campari, Awamo, Korn, the guides of the gods of destruction, arrived in a flash of blinding celestial light. They did not arrive casually. Their staffs were drawn, their halos flaring with combat readiness. They surrounded Goku in a perfect spherical formation, a cage of absolute divinity. Goku floated in the center of the sphere, his gray cloak billowing in the solar wind of their combined power. He looked at them not as enemies, but as tragic figures. 12 of you, Goku said, his voice soft but carrying clearly over the humming of their ki. 12 custodians of a broken garden. You have threatened the Grand Priest. Campari Universe 3 shouted, his voice high and sharp. You have broken the laws of the Omni King. Surrender, Saiyan, and your erasure will be painless. Goku slowly turned his head to look at Campari. The motion left a trail of afterimages that didn't fade, static glitches in reality. Erasure, Goku repeated. You speak of it so lightly. Have you ever felt it, Angel? Have you ever felt the silence of a million years? Daishinkan dropped his hand. Execute. The angels moved as one. It was a masterpiece of coordination. 12 beings with perfect ultra instinct attacked simultaneously. There was no lag, no hesitation, no wasted movement. Staves of divine light thrust toward Goku's vital points, heart, throat, spine, brain, from every angle. It was an attack that no being in the multiverse, not even Jiren or Broly at their peak, could have survived. But Goku was no longer playing by the rules of movement. He didn't dodge. He simply ceased to be there. The staves collided with each other in the center of the formation, creating a massive shockwave of sparks. Goku reappeared directly in front of Campari, so close that their noses almost touched. Too fast. Campari gasped, instinctively reversing time by 3 seconds to undo the mistake. The world rewound. The staves flew back. The angels returned to their starting positions. Campari breathed a sigh of relief. That doesn't work anymore, a voice whispered in his ear. Campari froze. He was back in the past, yet Goku was still standing next to him. Goku had stepped outside the flow of the rewind. He had anchored himself in a time that didn't exist. Time is a river, Goku said, his hand gently grasping the halo around Campari's neck. I learned to swim upstream, let go. Campari shrieked, channeling his entire existence into an erasure blast. Goku's hand didn't burn. The twilight key flared, turning deep violet. You are tired, Angel. You have served for eons, without sleep, without choice, without passion. Rest now. Goku squeezed. There was a sound like glass shattering underwater. Campari's halo cracked. The blue light of his skin flickered and drained away, replaced by a pale, mortal flesh tone. The white hair lost its divine sheen, falling flat. The power of Ultra Instinct evaporated from his cells. Campari fell. He didn't die. He simply fell, screaming, flailing his arms in the gravity of the void, stripped of flight, stripped of magic, stripped of immortality. He was now just a man. The other angels watched in horror as their brother plummeted into the dark below. He didn't kill him. Cuss, Universe, 10 stammered, her hands shaking. He mortalized him. He is infecting the divine hierarchy. Korn roared. Do not let him touch you. Attack from a distance. The remaining 11 angels unleashed a barrage of energy. Beams of pure erasure, binding spells, and dimensional seals rained down on Goku. It was a light show of apocalyptic proportions, enough energy to wipe out a supercluster of galaxies. Goku walked through the fire. The blasts hid his twilight aura and dissolved. He was a black hole walking through a flashlight beam. He raised his right hand, pointing 2 fingers at the attackers. Twilight Lance. From his fingertips, thin, needle-like beams of gray energy shot out. They didn't travel in straight lines. They curved, jagged, and unpredictable, tracking the souls of the targets. Mojito tried to dodge, weaving through the dimensions, but the beam followed him into the subspace and struck his shoulder. He cried out as his arm went limp. The divine key severed from the limb instantly. Awamo raised a shield of the hardest catch in magic, but the twilight beam passed through it as if it were smoke, striking him in the chest. He gasped, dropping his staff as he felt his heartbeat for the first time in 5 billion years. It was a massacre. Not of bodies, but of divinity. Goku moved like a phantom, a blur of gray and violet. He touched Sour on the forehead, and the angel fell asleep instantly, snoring as his immortality faded. He caught Kognac's kick and shattered the angel's leg, not the bone, but the concept of the leg's strength, rendering it as weak as a twig. Daishinkan watched from above, his face unreadable, though the air around him was freezing over. He was analyzing. He uses the destruction energy to break the divine bond, Daishinkan thought, his mind racing at light speed. And he uses the Ultra Instinct to bypass our defenses. He is not overwhelming us with raw power. He is dismantling the logic of our existence. Within minutes, only 2 angels remained standing near the Grand Priest, Vados and Whis. The others were drifting in the void, unconscious or weeping in confusion, grappling with the sudden, terrifying onset of mortality. Goku stopped his advance. He stood on a floating chunk of the ruined arena, looking up at his 2 former mentors. His chest wasn't heaving. He hadn't even broken a sweat. Whis, Goku said. His voice lost some of its terrifying edge, softening into something almost sad. Vados. Move aside. Whis gripped his cracked staff. His knuckles were white. He looked at the fallen angels, then back at the student he had trained for the Tournament of Power. He saw the shadow of the boy who had brought him delicious food, the boy who had been so eager to learn. I cannot, Goku-san, Whis said, his voice steady but low. If you proceed, you threaten the Omni King. That is the one line we cannot allow you to cross. The Omni King is a child with a loaded gun, Goku replied, taking a step upward, walking on the air as if it were stairs. And you are the parents who let him play with it. Goku? Vados interjected, her usual aloofness gone. Do you not see what you are doing? If you dismantle the hierarchy, the multiverse will collapse into chaos. Without the destroyers, life overpopulates. Without the Kais, creation stalls. Without Zeno, there is no canvas. Then let the canvas burn, Goku said, his eyes flashing with the binary spinning lights. I will weave a new one. A canvas where survival isn't a game for your amusement. He vanished. Whis and Vados reacted instantly, crossing their staffs to create a barrier of absolute defense. Clang. Goku appeared directly in front of them, his hands gripping their staffs. He wasn't pushing, he was holding them in place. The gray energy of his hands began to bleed into the white wood of their weapons. You taught me to trust my body, Goku whispered, leaning in close to Whis. But you never taught me to trust my pain. You suppress yours, you hide behind your neutrality. The twilight energy surged, the barrier shattered. Whis and Vados were thrown backward, crashing onto the platform beside the Grand Priest. They scrambled to recover, but Goku was already there. He didn't strike them. He simply stood over them, looking down at the Grand Priest. Your children are down, Priest, Goku said. The walls have fallen. There is only you left between me and the throne. Daishinkan slowly floated downward until his feet touched the stone. He did not look afraid. He looked disappointed. I had hoped, the Grand Priest said, his voice echoing with the authority of the One Above All, that it would not come to this. You are a magnificent tragedy, son Goku, but a tragedy nonetheless. The Grand Priest opened his arms. The space behind him dissolved, revealing a blinding white light that was not ki, but the raw material of creation itself. I do not need to fight you, Daishinkan stated. I simply need to correct the error. He raised one finger. Rest. Goku's body suddenly seized. The twilight aura flickered. The million years of time he had accumulated began to feel heavy, as if the Grand Priest was trying to force all that time to happen at once, aging him to dust in an instant. Goku fell to one knee, the stone cracking under his weight. His skin began to gray, his hair turning brittle. You are time's prisoner, Daishinkan declared, walking calmly toward the kneeling Saiyan. And I am the warden. The weight of a million years is not a metaphor. It is a physical mass, heavy enough to crush stars into singularities. Daishinkan, the Grand Priest, did not merely cast a spell. He collapsed the timeline of the time chamber onto Goku's shoulders. He condensed the eons of isolation, the rotting of the mind, the decay of the flesh, and dropped it all at once upon the Saiyan's kneeling form. Goku's skin turned the color of ash. His back bowed. The stone beneath his knee turned to powder, unable to withstand the sudden increase in existential density. It is over, Daishinkan stated, his voice devoid of triumph, merely reciting a fact. You have exceeded your narrative, son Goku. You are an anomaly, and anomalies must be corrected. Daishinkan raised his hand to deliver the final blow, a technique of pure separation that would unravel Goku's soul from his body. But Goku did not fall. A low sound began to emanate from the kneeling figure. It wasn't a groan of pain. It was a laugh. It was a dry, rasping sound, like wind whistling through a graveyard of bones. Corrected, Goku whispered. The word hung in the air, heavy and sharp. Slowly, agonizingly, the Saiyan began to rise. His bones popped with the sound of cannon fire. His skin, gray and withered, began to crack not from age, but because something new was pushing from underneath. You think time is a weapon? Goku asked, turning his face upward. The violet light in his eyes had not dimmed. It had intensified, swirling with a hunger that made the void recoil. You think the million years weakened me, priest? I ate the time. Goku stood to his full height. The gray, aged skin shattered like a porcelain shell, falling away to reveal a form that was terrified in its perfection. He looked neither young nor old. He looked eternal. The Twilight Key exploded outward, not as a wave, but as a sudden expansion of reality. It swallowed Daishinkan's time dilation field instantly. I didn't survive the chamber, Goku said, his voice echoing with the harmonic distortion of two realities. I became the chamber. Daishinkan's eyes widened. For the first time in recorded history, he stepped back, raising both hands to summon the full authority of the angelic laws. You cannot. Goku moved. He didn't teleport. He simply occupied the space where Daishinkan stood. He placed a hand on the Grand Priest's chest. The contact made no sound. There was no impact. Instead, the blue skin of the Grand Priest began to turn gray. The halo behind his head stopped spinning. The divine light in his eyes flickered and died. Your watch is ended, Goku said softly. He didn't kill the Grand Priest. He did something worse. He stripped him of his purpose. He drained the concept of authority from Daishinkan's soul, absorbing it into the twilight. The Grand Priest crumpled, not dead, but hollow, a suit of clothes with no one inside, falling silently to the shattered floor. Goku did not look back. He turned his gaze upward, toward the single, floating palace that hung at the apex of the world of void. The kanji for all, Jin floated in the sky, glowing with ominous cheerfulness. The palace of Zeno. Goku began to walk up the air. Each step created a ripple of gray light, forming a staircase of twilight leading to the throne of God. The great hall of the Omni Kings was silent. The two Zenos, future and present, sat on their floating thrones, their legs dangling, their faces etched with a confusion that was rapidly souring into panic. They had watched on their god pads. They had seen the angels fall. They had seen the Grand Priest crumble. It's not fun, the present Zeno whispered, his high-pitched voice trembling. It's scary, the future Zeno agreed, gripping the armrest of his throne. The doors to the throne room, massive and colorful, blew inward. They didn't break. They turned into dust and blew away in a wind that smelled of ancient rain. Goku walked in. He looked like a shadow cast by a dying universe. The gray cloak of Ki trailed behind him, consuming the light of the room. The colorful pillars, the bright floor, the starry sky, everything drained of color as he passed, turning to monochrome. The Grand Minister's guards, tall and imposing, rushed him with spears of erasure energy. Goku didn't even look at them. He walked through them. As he passed, the guards dissolved into mist. Their energy simply pulled into the orbit of the twilight singularity. He stopped at the foot of the stairs. He looked up at the two small, football-headed deities who held the power to delete existence with a clenched fist. Goku, the present Zeno shouted, pointing a small finger. You are being bad. Go away. Erase. The future Zeno shouted, mimicking the motion. Twin beams of white light, the ultimate erase command, shot from their hands. This was the power that had wiped out Zamasu. This was the power that had erased universes in the Tournament of Power. It was the absolute command of the author to remove a character from the page. The light hit Goku, and the light broke. The beams shattered against his chest like glass rods hitting a diamond wall. Fragments of white light scattered across the floor, sizzling and fading. The Xenos gasped, their hands shaking. Why? Why doesn't it go away? Because, Goku said, his voice sounding incredibly tired, I am not a character in your story anymore. He walked up the stairs. The Xenos huddled together, terrified. For the first time in their eternal lives, the gods of destruction were afraid of being destroyed. Goku reached the top. He stood before the thrones, towering over the creators of the multiverse. He looked down at them, but there was no hatred in his eyes. Only a deep, crushing pity. You are children, Goku said quietly. You play with lives like they are toys. You erase billions because you are bored. You shatter timelines because you are confused. He reached out. The Xenos tried to fly away, but the air around them had turned solid. They were trapped in the twilight. It is not your fault. Goku continued, his hand hovering over their heads. You were made this way. Boundless power, with no wisdom to guide it. A broken engine driving a broken car. Goku, stop, Present Zeno cried, tears forming in his eyes. We will be good, we promise. I know, Goku said. A single tear, gray and heavy, rolled down his own cheek. But the game has to end. He placed his hands on their heads. The Xenos did not scream. They simply faded. Their forms dissolved into pure white light, streams of innocent energy that flowed into Goku's palms. He didn't destroy them. He absorbed the potential of creation. He took the ink back from the writers. Now, he was alone. The palace was empty. The world of void was silent. The angels were fallen. The gods were broken. The Omni-Kings were gone. Goku sat down on the floor where the thrones had been. He crossed his legs in the lotus position. He closed his eyes. He felt the multiverse. He felt the heartbeat of Universe 7, the struggle of Universe 6, the technology of Universe 3. He felt the pain, the wars, the hunger. He felt the chaotic, messy, beautiful struggle of life, trapped in a rigged system. 1 million years, he whispered to the silence. I learned that light is not enough. Light casts shadows, and darkness is not enough. Darkness consumes itself. He brought his hands together in front of his chest. The twilight key flared, expanding to fill the room, then the palace, then the world of void. There must be a 0 point. He began to channel everything. The tranquility of the angels, the destruction of the Hakai, the creation of the Kaioshians, the absolute authority of Zeno, the rage of the Saiyan, the hope of the human. He compressed it all into a single sphere of energy between his palms. It was no larger than a marble. It was black, white, and gray, swirling in a pattern that looked like a galaxy being born. I am the lock, Goku said, his voice vibrating across every timeline, heard by every living soul in the multiverse as a whisper in their dreams. And I am the key. He looked at the marble. He saw Chi-Chi's face in it. He saw Gohan studying. He saw Vegeta scowling. He saw the life he had lost, the sacrifice he had made. Goodbye, he whispered. He crushed the marble. The 0 point. Sound died. Light died. The multiverse did not explode. It imploded. The 12 universes were pulled inward, unraveled from their separate dimensions, and drawn into the world of void. The timelines collapsed, merging, folding, dissolving. The history of the Saiyans, the legacy of Frieza, the tournaments, the Dragon Balls, it all spiraled into the center of the twilight, into the singularity that was Son Goku. He became the event horizon. He became the filter. He burned away the hierarchies. He burned away the need for destroyers. He burned away the divine lottery that decided who lived and who died. And finally, he burned away himself. Son Goku dissolved. The body that had trained for 1,000,000 years, the mind that had endured eternity, surrendered its form. He poured his very existence into the seed of the new reality. White. The sky was blue. Not the artificial blue of a painted dome, but the deep, rich blue of an atmosphere rich with oxygen and life. Vegeta woke up. He sat up with a gasp, his hand instinctively going to his chest, expecting a wound. There was none. He was lying in a field of green grass. The air smelled sweet. He looked around. He was on Earth. But it wasn't the Earth he remembered. The key in the air. It felt different. It didn't feel heavy with the threat of invasion. It felt free. Vegeta. He turned. Bulma was standing there, holding a basket. She looked younger, unburdened. Where is Kakarot? Vegeta asked, his voice hoarse. He had a vague memory of a great storm, of a gray shadow that had swallowed the sky, and then, waking up. Bulma paused. She looked up at the sun. It was shining brighter than usual, and if you squinted, just right, the light didn't look purely yellow. It had a faint, gentle halo of twilight violet around the edges. I don't know, Bulma said softly. I feel like he went on a long journey. Vegeta stood up. He looked at the sky. He searched for the key signature of his rival. He searched for the pressure of Beerus. He searched for the whisper of Whis. There was nothing. The gods were gone. The angels were gone. The threat of erasure was gone. There were just the stars, burning quietly in the infinite dark, free to live and die on their own terms. Vegeta closed his eyes. He felt a phantom sensation, a hand on his shoulder, heavy and warm, and a voice that sounded like the rustle of ancient leaves. Train hard, Vegeta. Vegeta opened his eyes. A single tear betrayed the Prince of Saiyans, rolling down his cheek. He wiped it away furiously and smirked at the sun. Don't tell me what to do, clown, he whispered. He turned and walked back toward his family, under the light of a sun that would never again be threatened by the whims of a god.